The sun hung low over the vast expanse of the Serengeti, casting long shadows across the golden grasslands that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Dust swirled in lazy eddies as a weathered Land Rover bounced along the rutted track, its engine humming steadily against the chorus of distant bird calls and the occasional rumble of thunder from gathering clouds. Inside the Jeep, Emily Hargrove gripped the armrest, her knuckles whitening with each jolt. At 42, she was no stranger to adventure. Years as a high school biology teacher in Seattle had fueled her passion for the wild, but this trip to Tanzania with her husband and teenage son felt like a leap into the unknown. Beside her, Mark Hargrove adjusted his wide-brimmed hat, squinting through the binoculars at a herd of zebras grazing in the distance. A software engineer from the Pacific Northwest, he'd traded rainy weekends hiking the Olympics for this once-in-a-lifetime safari, hoping it would mend the subtle fractures in their family routine. Their son Tyler slouched in the back seat, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone despite the spotty signal. At 16, he was more interested in capturing the perfect Instagram reel than appreciating the raw beauty around him. "Dad, can we stop soon? This is bumpy as hell," Tyler grumbled, pulling out one earbud. Their guide, a wiry Tanzanian named Juma, chuckled from the driver's seat, his English laced with a melodic accent. "Patience, young one. The lions wait for no man or boy. We're heading to the river crossing. That's where the real magic happens." Juma had been leading tours through these plains for over 2 decades, his knowledge of the land as deep as the roots of the acacia trees dotting the landscape. He pointed ahead to where the track dipped toward a shimmering ribbon of water, the Mara River, swollen from recent rains and teeming with life. As the Jeep crested a gentle rise, Emily's eyes caught something unusual, a small, tawny shape stumbling through the tall grass, far from the safety of a pride. She leaned forward, heart quickening. "Juma, slow down. What's that?" The guide eased off the accelerator, and they all peered out. There, no more than 50 yards away, was a lion cub, its fur matted with dust and burrs, limping determinedly after them. It couldn't have been more than 6 months old, its oversized paws splaying awkwardly on the uneven terrain, eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and desperation. Mark lowered his binoculars, his face paling. "Is it following us?" The cub paused, ears twitching, then bounded a few steps closer, letting out a plaintive mew that cut through the air like a child's cry. Tyler sat up straight, phone forgotten in his lap. "Whoa, that's no kitty. It's tiny, though. Where's its mom?" Juma's expression darkened as he pulled the Jeep to a halt. He scanned the horizon with practiced eyes, the kind that had seen too many harsh truths of the wild. "Lost, I think. Prides move fast after a kill. Cubs get left behind if they're weak. This one's alone. Dangerous out here." He didn't start the engine again, watching as the cub closed the gap, its ribs visible beneath the thin coat, nose sniffing the air toward the vehicle. In the savannah, isolation was a death sentence. Hyenas, leopards, even crocodiles in the river ahead would claim such easy prey. Emily felt a pang in her chest, the maternal instinct kicking in despite the species barrier. She'd read about wildlife rescues, seen documentaries on poaching and habitat loss, but this was visceral, immediate. "We can't just leave it," she said softly, her voice trembling. Mark shot her a look, practical as ever. "Em, we're tourists, not rangers. Juma, what's the protocol here?" The guide sighed, rubbing his chin. "Protocol is observe, don't interfere, but—" He trailed off as the cub reached the Jeep, rearing up on its hind legs to paw at the tire, its golden eyes locking onto Emily's through the open window. A soft rumble escaped its throat, not a roar, but a needy whimper that echoed the loneliness of the plains. Tyler leaned over the seat, snapping a photo before Juma gently pushed his arm down. "No flash, boy. Startles them." For a moment the world narrowed to that fragile connection. The cub's persistence was heartbreaking. It had clearly been trailing scents or sounds for hours, drawn to the jeep's movement like a beacon in the wilderness. Juma radioed his base camp, his voice low and urgent in Swahili, then switched back to English. "They say stay put. Rangers are an hour out, maybe more with the rain coming. If we drive off, it might follow anyway, straight into trouble." Mark nodded reluctantly, his mind racing through liability forms they'd signed back at the lodge. But seeing the cub's determined gait, the way it mirrored their path without faltering, stirred something protective in him too. "All right, we wait." Emily reached out tentatively, her hand hovering near the door, but Juma shook his head. "Not yet. Lions are wild, even small ones. Claws and teeth don't care about good intentions." As minutes stretched into a tense half-hour, the cubs circled the jeep, occasionally brushing against it, seeking warmth or reassurance. The sky darkened, the first fat drops of rain pattering on the roof. Tyler, for once engaged, whispered questions to Juma about lion behavior, learning how cubs relied on their mothers for survival, how a lost one faced starvation or predation within days. Emily watched the cubs' labored breaths, imagining its fear, the vast, indifferent savanna swallowing it whole. Then, as the rain picked up, the cub made its choice. With a final, resolute glance, it fell into step behind the jeep when Juma finally inched forward at a crawl. It followed mile after mile through the downpour, its small form a stubborn shadow against the storm. The Hargroves exchanged glances, a silent pact forming amid the whipping wind and mud-slicked track. Little did they know, this unlikely pursuit was leading them toward a river swollen with peril, where the line between spectator and savior would blur forever. The jeep pressed on, the cub's paws splashing through puddles, its mews lost to the thunder. In the distance, the river roared, a churning barrier that had claimed countless lives. For the Hargrove family, what began as a scenic drive was unraveling into a test of humanity's reach into the wild, a story that would soon ripple across the world, stunning those who heard it with its raw, unfiltered truth. The rain intensified as the Land Rover forged ahead, its tires churning through the thickening mud that clung to the undercarriage like wet clay. Emily pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, her breath fogging the pain in rhythmic bursts. The cub's silhouette flickered in the side mirror, a determined blur against the blurred landscape of acacias bending under the assault of wind and water. It had been nearly an hour since they'd started this slow procession, the jeep crawling at no more than 5 miles per hour to keep the little lion from losing its footing entirely. Each time Juma glanced back, his brow furrowed deeper, the lines etched from years of witnessing nature's unyielding cruelty. "Can't we pick it up?" Tyler asked from the back, his voice cracking with a mix of excitement and unease. He'd abandoned his phone entirely now, leaning forward with elbows on his knees, watching the cub's progress like it was the climax of his favorite video game. Mark turned in his seat, shooting his son a warning look. "We're not turning this into a zoo exhibit, Ty. Juma said the Rangers are coming. Let's not make it worse." But even Mark's tone lacked conviction. The engine's low growl seemed to mock their hesitation, carrying them inexorably toward the river's edge. Juma kept his eyes on the track, hands steady on the wheel, despite the slick conditions. "The Mara is no friend today," he said, his voice cutting through the drumbeat of rain on the roof. "Crocodiles wait in the shallows, hippos claim the deep channels. If that cub gets too close without its pride—" He let the words hang, unnecessary in their implication. Emily swallowed hard, picturing the documentaries she'd shown her students, grainy footage of the annual wildebeest migration, where the river turned into a graveyard of thrashing hooves and snapping jaws. This wasn't a spectacle from afar. It was unfolding in real time, with their vehicle as the unwitting anchor. The terrain grew treacherous, the path narrowing as it descended toward the riverbank. Tall grasses whipped against the jeep's sides, releasing a sharp, earthy scent that mingled with the metallic tang of ozone. The cub, soaked to its core, let out a series of high-pitched whines that pierced the storm's roar, each one tugging at Emily's resolve like a hook in her gut. She twisted in her seat, catching sight of it again, paws sinking into the mud, body low to the ground, but still pushing forward with a tenacity that bordered on the miraculous. "How far has it followed us already?" she murmured, more to herself than anyone. 3 miles. Easy," Juma replied, checking his odometer. "Smarter than it looks. Scent of humans. Noise of the engine. It's clinging to hope in a place that offers none." His words carried the weight of experience. Juma had lost count of the orphans he'd seen succumb to the savannah's indifference. Poachers had thinned the lion populations, droughts had scattered prides, and now climate shifts made every season a gamble. This cub, with its oversized ears plastered flat against its skull, was a casualty in a larger war, one the Hargroves had stumbled into on vacation. Tyler fidgeted, pulling at the hem of his rain jacket. "This is insane. Like, what if it just stops or gets hit by something?" Mark reached back to squeeze his shoulder, a rare gesture of reassurance amid their family's usual banter. "It won't. We're almost at the crossing point. The Rangers will handle it." But doubt crept into his voice as the river came into view, a muddy torrent churning between steep banks lined with fever trees. The water was higher than usual, foam-capped waves slapping against rocks that jutted like teeth from the current. In the distance, a pod of hippos grunted from a submerged island, their massive forms half visible through the sheets of rain. Juma eased the jeep to a stop on a slight overlook, the engine idling as he scanned the opposite bank with binoculars. "Radio says the team's delayed. Flash flood upstream blocked the road. We might be on our own for a bit." The admission hung heavy, amplifying the isolation. Emily's heart pounded, her mind racing through scenarios she'd only imagined in the safety of her classroom. She thought of her students back in Seattle, debating conservation ethics over cafeteria lunches. What would they say to this? Intervene and risk everything, or stand by and let nature's law prevail? The cub, sensing the halt, staggered up to the jeep's rear bumper, collapsing in a heap against the spare tire. Its chest heaved with exhaustion, eyes half-lidded but fixed on the vehicle's warmth. Without thinking, Emily unbuckled her seatbelt and cracked the door, the rain immediately soaking her sleeve. "Emily, no!" Mark hissed, but she was already out, crouching low as water streamed down her face. The cub lifted its head, sniffing the air, a low growl rumbling in its throat, not aggressive but wary, born of survival instinct. "Easy, little one," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gale. She extended a hand, palm up, letting the scent of her soap and sunscreen from the morning's lotion reach it. The cub tensed, then inched closer, its rough tongue flicking out to taste the rain on her fingers. A shiver ran through Emily, not from the cold, but from the electric trust in that moment. Mark joined her, umbrella in hand, while Tyler hovered at the door, wide-eyed. Juma stayed inside, radio crackling with static updates, his face a mask of reluctant approval. For 10 agonizing minutes, they coaxed the cub toward the shelter of the jeep's undercarriage, using a blanket from the supply kit to shield it from the downpour. It resisted at first, swatting weakly with a paw that belied its frailty. But hunger and fatigue won out. Tyler tossed a protein bar from his backpack, unwise, Juma later chided, but desperate times blurred lines. The cub nibbled tentatively, its jaws working with the ferocity of the starved. As the storm peaked, a distant rumble, not thunder but an engine, signaled hope. 2 ranger vehicles emerged from the mist on the far side, their lights cutting through the grey like beacons. But the river stood between them, a raging divide that swelled with every passing second. Juma's radio burst to life. The crossing was too dangerous. They'd need to ferry the cub across somehow. Emily looked down at the trembling form, now huddled against her leg, its warmth seeping through her soaked pants. The rescue was just beginning, and the stakes had skyrocketed. The rangers shouted instructions across the water, their voices lost to the roar, gesturing for the Hargroves to secure the cub and prepare for a makeshift bridge of sorts, ropes and a raft from their gear. Mark's practical mind kicked into overdrive, calculating risks, while Tyler's youthful energy fueled the urgency. But as the first ranger began wading into the shallows, dodging a lurking croc's shadow, Emily realized this wasn't just about one lost life. It was a collision of worlds. Tourist curiosity meeting the raw pulse of the wild, and the river would decide if they'd all make it through unbroken. The cub's eyes met hers again, a silent plea that bound them in the chaos, pulling the family deeper into a saga that would echo far beyond the Serengeti's rain-swept plains. The rain hammered down relentlessly, turning the riverbank into a slick quagmire where every step threatened to send someone sliding into the churning Mara. Emily knelt beside the cub, her knees sinking into the mud as she stroked its damp fur with tentative fingers, feeling the rapid flutter of its heartbeat against her palm. The little lion's body was a bundle of contradictions, fierce in its will to survive, yet fragile as a newborn, its ribs pressing like fragile bars beneath the sodden coat. She could smell the wild musk of it now, mingled with the petrichor rising from the earth, a scent that grounded her in the moment's peril. Across the water, the rangers moved with the efficiency of men who danced with death too many times. The lead one, a broad-shouldered Tanzanian named Elias, whose face bore scars from old croc encounters, uncoiled a length of heavy rope from his truck's bed. He was in his late 40s, with a voice that boomed like thunder even over the storm. "Secure the cub. We'll rig a line. Pull it across on the raft," he yelled, his words barely carrying as he tied one end to a sturdy fever tree on his side. The other rangers, younger and wiry, fanned out, one scanning the shallows with a spotlight that cut erratic beams through the downpour, revealing the lazy swirl of a crocodile's tail vanishing into the foam. Mark stood shoulder to shoulder with Juma, the two men hashing out the logistics in hurried tones. "We've got to get it into something stable," Mark said, his engineer's brain mapping out the physics of the current's pull. He rummaged through the Jeep's kit, pulling out an old canvas tarp and bungee cords, fashioning a makeshift harness around the cub's torso. It squirmed at first, a low growl vibrating through its chest, but Emily's soothing murmurs, nonsense words about Seattle's gentle rains and safe classrooms, seemed to calm it. Tyler hovered nearby, his sneakers caked in mud, handing over whatever supplies he could grab, his usual teenage nonchalance shattered by the adrenaline surging through him. Juma nodded approval at Mark's contraption, though his eyes never left the river. "Good work, Bwana. But the crocs, they sense weakness. One wrong splash, and it's over." He fired up the Jeep's winch, attaching it to the rope Elias had thrown across, the line tautening like a lifeline between worlds. The rangers had paddled the inflatable raft halfway over already, two men rowing against the current, while a third balanced on the prow, rifle at the ready. Not for killing, but deterrence. Hippos surfaced nearby with guttural snorts, their pinkish hides glistening, eyes like black marbles fixed on the intruders. Emily lifted the cub carefully, its weight surprising her, barely 20 pounds but dense with muscle and desperation. She wrapped it in the tarp, securing it so only its head poked out, those golden eyes blinking against the rain. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, more for her own reassurance than anything. The cub licked her chin once, a rough, trusting gesture that sent a lump to her throat. Tyler helped hoist it toward the water's edge, where the rope met the bank, his hands trembling as he clipped the harness to the line. For a split second, the family stood frozen, the storm's fury mirroring the turmoil in their hearts. This wasn't their world. Yet here they were, hands deep in its chaos. Elias's team reached the near bank with a grunt, the raft scraping against rocks as they beached it. One ranger, a woman named Amina, with braided hair tied back under a sodden cap, jumped out first, her boots splashing into the shallows. She was a conservation officer from Arusha, driven by a personal vendetta against poachers who'd orphaned her village's wildlife. "Hand it over, quick," she said, her English crisp from years training with international NGOs. Emily passed the bundled cub, watching as Amina checked its vitals with practiced efficiency, a stethoscope from her pack confirming a steady, if weak, pulse. The cub mewed softly, nuzzling against the stranger's arm, as if sensing the shift from peril to protection. The return trip was a battle. The rangers loaded the cub onto the raft, securing it amidships while Mark and Juma fed slack on the rope from the jeep, the winch whining in protest against the river's tug. Tyler gripped the binoculars, his breath hitching as a croc lunged from the murk, jaws snapping inches from the raft's edge. Amina fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing like lightning, scattering the beast back into the depths. Emily shielded her eyes, heart in her throat, praying the line held. The water foamed around the raft, carrying debris from upstream, branches, a half-submerged log that could capsize them in an instant. On the far bank, Elias hauled the raft in with brute strength, his muscles straining under the weight of the current. The cub arrived sodden but alive, its whines turning to exhausted pants as they unwrapped it. Amina radioed for the vet truck, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Female, about 5 months, malnourished, possible injury to left paw, stable for now." The Hargroves watched from their side, the distance feeling vast despite the thin rope that had bridged it. Mark exhaled slowly, clapping Juma on the back. "We did it. They're safe." But the relief was short-lived. As the rangers bundled the cub into a portable crate lined with straw, Elias crossed back alone on the raft, his expression grave. He waded ashore, dripping and resolute. "You tourists, you saved this one. But the pride's gone. Tracks show they moved east after a kill, left her behind. She's too young to make it alone." He glanced at Emily, who nodded, wiping rain from her face. "We'll take her to the sanctuary in Serenera, rehabilitation, then release if she strengthens. But this river, it's claimed 3 cubs this season already. Climate's changing the flows, bringing more floods." Tyler, still buzzing, pulled out his phone despite the signal. "Can we visit her? Like, see if she makes it?" Elias managed a tired smile. "Maybe. If you come back. Stories like this, they spread. Get people caring." Juma started the jeep, the engine's rumble a welcome normalcy amid the subsiding storm. As they pulled away, the ranger's lights fading in the rear view, Emily leaned back, the cub's warmth a ghost on her skin. The family rode in silence at first, the weight of what they'd done settling like the clearing sky. Mark broke it eventually, his voice soft. "That was something else." Tyler nodded, scrolling through the few photos he'd managed, blurry shots of the cub's eyes, the raft battling the waves. "Yeah, way better than any reel." Emily smiled faintly, staring out at the receding river, now a calmer serpent under the emerging stars. They'd crossed a line today, from observers to participants, and the ripples of that choice were just beginning to spread. Back at the lodge that night, word would leak to other guides, then to the park's social channels, a viral tale of a lost cub and unlikely heroes. But for the Hargroves, it was more than a story. It was a fracture in their ordinary lives, mended by the wild's unyielding pull. The sanctuary's team worked through the night, the cub, dubbed Mara by Amina for the river that nearly ended her, receiving fluids and a warm den. Tests revealed a sprained paw from her trek, burrs embedded in her fur carrying seeds from miles away, proof of her epic pursuit. News outlets picked it up by morning. American family aids, dramatic lion cub rescue in Serengeti. Interviews followed, Emily's voice steady as she recounted the cub's stubborn shadow behind the jeep, the river's roar, the fragile trust in those golden eyes. Tyler's photos went viral, his Instagram transforming from memes to conservation pleas. Yet amid the attention, doubts lingered. Mark worried about the ethics. Had they tampered with nature's balance? Juma, over campfire coffee the next day, shrugged. Sometimes the wild needs a hand. That cub followed you for a reason. Emily felt it deepest, lying awake to the hyena whoops outside the lodge. The rescue had stunned the world, yes, but it had reshaped hers too, igniting a fire to advocate back home, to turn classroom lessons into real change. The Serengeti had given them a gift wrapped in mud and rain, a reminder that humanity's reach could extend tenderly into the heart of the untamed. Back in Seattle, the Hargrove home felt smaller than Emily remembered. The familiar scent of pine from the backyard evergreens, a stark contrast to the acrid tang of Serengeti dust that still clung to their unpacked suitcases. It had been 2 weeks since the river crossing, but the images replayed in her mind like a looped film reel. The cub's golden eyes locking onto hers through the rain, the taut rope slicing the foam, the ranger's triumphant shouts echoing over the Mara. Their flight home had been a blur of jet lag and quiet reflection, interrupted only by the ping of notifications as the story broke online. By the time they touched down at SeaTac, Mara the miracle cub was trending, Tyler's shaky video clips racking up millions of views on wildlife forums and news sites. Emily stood at the kitchen counter that first morning back, stirring coffee while staring at her laptop screen. The local news had picked it up, a feature on King 5 about Seattle families' daring Serengeti save, complete with interviews from the lodge staff and Juma's gravelly voice praising their quick thinking. Mark, ever the pragmatist, scrolled through emails at the table, his brow furrowed over a message from his boss. Congratulations mixed with a subtle nudge about work deadlines piling up. "This is great PR for conservation, but let's not let it derail us," he said, though his eyes betrayed a spark of pride he couldn't quite hide. Tyler bounded down the stairs, phone in hand, already live-streaming his morning routine with a dramatic recount of the rescue woven in. "Guys, check this. National Geographic wants an exclusive. I'm basically famous now." The attention swelled like the river they'd crossed, pulling the family into a current they hadn't anticipated. Emily's school principal called that afternoon, inviting her to share the story with the biology club. She agreed, her voice steady on the line, but inside a knot of uncertainty twisted. What did they really save? A life, yes, but at what cost to the wild's delicate balance? Juma's parting words at the airport, "The savannah thanks you, but it doesn't forget," haunted her, a reminder that their intervention was a ripple in an ocean of threats, habitat loss from expanding farms, poaching rings slipping across borders, droughts that starved prides into desperation. By evening, the house buzzed with delivery boxes, fan mail from strangers touched by the tale, care packages from animal rights groups with stickers and petitions. Tyler set up a GoFundMe almost impulsively, linking it to Serengeti conservation efforts, and donations poured in faster than he could refresh the page. "This is wild, pun intended," he laughed, showing Mark the tally climbing past 10 grand. But beneath the excitement, fractures from their pre-trip routine resurfaced. Mark retreated to his home office, buried in code, while Tyler's phone addiction morphed into constant content creation. His room a mess of charging cables and half-eaten energy bars. Emily felt the pull most acutely, wandering the neighborhood trails near Lake Washington, the damp Pacific Northwest air a far cry from the sun-baked plains. She missed the cub's warmth against her leg, the raw immediacy of that storm-swept bank. A week later, an email from Amina arrived, crisp and professional, with attached photos that stopped Emily cold. Mara, the cub, was thriving at the Serenera Sanctuary, a fenced enclosure mimicking the savannah, where she romped with other orphans under the watchful eyes of vets. Her paw had healed, the sprain nothing a few weeks of rest couldn't mend, and she'd gained weight, her coat gleaming like fresh gold. "She's feisty," Amina wrote. "Tried to pounce on a warthog dummy yesterday. Your family's involvement inspired donors here. New equipment for the rehab center thanks to the buzz." Emily printed the images, taping them to the fridge like talismans. Mark paused over breakfast to study one, the cub mid-leap, frozen in a moment of pure, untamed joy. "Looks like she's got fight in her, just like someone else I know," he said, squeezing Emily's hand, a small bridge over the emotional gulf that had widened during their marriage's busy years. Tyler's school caught wind too. His history teacher pulled him aside after class, assigning an extra credit essay on human-wildlife interactions, drawing parallels to colonial-era safaris that romanticized the African wild while exploiting it. Tyler grumbled at first but dove in, interviewing Emily for quotes and even Skyping Juma one rainy evening. The guide's face filled the screen, his lodge in the background alive with the chatter of evening guests. "The cub followed you because she sensed safety," Juma explained, his accent warming the cold Seattle room. "But remember, Bwana Tyler, fame fades. Real change is in the quiet work, supporting locals, fighting the poachers who sneak in at night." Tyler nodded, the conversation shifting his online persona from thrill-seeker to advocate. His posts now laced with facts about lion populations plummeting by 30% in a decade. Yet not all ripples were gentle. A conservation blogger critiqued their role in a viral thread. "Tourist meddling risks dependency. Let nature sort it." The comments stung, echoing Mark's initial doubts, and dinner that night turned tense. "We didn't ask for this circus," Mark said, pushing his salmon around the plate. Fresh from Pike Place, a taste of home that suddenly felt mundane. Emily set down her fork, the clink sharp. "But we did it, and Mara's alive because of us. Isn't that worth the noise?" Tyler surprisingly sided with her. "Dad, and come on, this could actually help, like get funding to stop the farms encroaching on the parks." The argument fizzled into uneasy truce, but it cracked open doors, Mark volunteering to crunch data for a wildlife NGO, Emily planning a guest lecture series at the Pacific Science Center. As autumn leaves turned the streets gold, the story's global reach unfolded in unexpected ways. A documentary crew from the BBC reached out, proposing a follow-up trip, but Emily demurred, suggesting they focus on the rangers instead. She drove to the University of Washington one crisp afternoon, meeting with a biologist friend who pored over satellite maps of the Serengeti. "Your cub's pride might regroup," the expert said, tracing migration patterns. "But with floods like that rivers becoming the norm, releases are riskier." Emily absorbed it, the weight of climate's invisible hand pressing down. Back home, she found Tyler editing a video montage, the jeep's crawl through the rain, the raft's perilous crossing, Mara's sanctuary photos fading in. "For YouTube," he explained, "to keep the momentum going." Nights brought dreams for Emily, the cub's mew echoing over the Mara's roar, morphing into her students' voices, debating ethics in a sunlit classroom. She woke with resolve, drafting letters to senators about international aid for Tanzanian parks. Mark noticed the change, the way she hummed old field trip songs while grading papers. Their walks along the lake grew longer, conversations deeper, The shared secret of that rainy day binding them tighter. Tyler too evolved, trading late-night gaming for research binges, his grades ticking up as passion fueled purpose. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, an echo of the Serengeti storm, a package arrived from the sanctuary. Inside, a small plush lion tagged with Mara's name and a note from Elias. "She's learning to hunt shadows. Thanks for the start." Emily held it, the soft fur evoking that mud-slicked paw against her skin. The world had been stunned by the rescue, yes, but for the Hargroves, it was the quiet transformation that lingered, the wild's gift of perspective, turning ordinary lives toward something fiercer, more connected. Outside, the city lights reflected on the water, a reminder that even in the concrete sprawl, echoes of the savannah could roar. Months passed, like the slow migration of herds across the plains, each day in Seattle layering new routines over the raw edges of their Serengeti adventure. Emily Hargrove found herself rising earlier than usual, the pre-dawn quiet of their suburban neighborhood broken only by the distant hum of commuter traffic on I-5. She slipped into the home office she'd converted from the guest room, a space now cluttered with stacks of research printouts and a world map pinned to the wall, red string tracing from Lake Washington to the heart of Tanzania. The plush lion from the sanctuary sat on her desk, its button eyes watching as she typed emails to NGOs, her fingers flying across the keyboard with a purpose that had been dormant for years. The viral wave of their story had crested and begun to ebb, but its undercurrents persisted. Tyler's YouTube channel, rebranded as Wild Echoes, had surged past 50,000 subscribers, his videos blending shaky safari footage with interviews from experts he'd cold-called via email. He spent afternoons in the garage, editing under the flicker of LED lights, the air thick with the scent of microwave popcorn and teenage ambition. "Mom, check this out," he'd say, pausing a clip where Amina described Mara's latest milestone, her first successful stalk of a tethered goat dummy. Emily would lean over his shoulder, the glow of the screen illuminating the fine lines of worry that had etched deeper around her eyes since the rescue. Pride swelled in her chest, mixed with a mother's quiet fear that this fire might burn him out before college applications loomed. Mark, too, had channeled the experience into his work, volunteering weekends to code algorithms for a non-profit tracking poacher movements via satellite data. His once cluttered desk at home now featured a framed photo from the riverbank, the family huddled under rain ponchos, the cub's blurry form in the foreground, Elias's raft slicing the water behind them. It was a talisman against the monotony of debugging sessions, reminding him that lines of code could safeguard more than servers. They could protect lives on the other side of the world. Yet, in quiet moments, like driving Tyler to soccer practice through the evergreen-draped streets of Bellevue, he'd voice the doubts that still nagged. What if we romanticized it too much? That blogger was right. Tourists like us swoop in, make headlines, then fly home to lattes and lawns. Emily would counter gently, her hand on his knee at a stoplight. "We didn't just make headlines, Mark. We sparked something. Look at Tyler. He's not scrolling memes anymore. He's building a platform." And it was true. The boy's transformation was the most profound, his lanky frame filling out from runs along the Burke-Gilman Trail, where he'd dictate voice memos for his next video, pondering the ethics of intervention. School had become a battleground of ideas. During a debate club meeting, he'd argued passionately for community-led conservation, citing the Serengeti's local guides like Juma as unsung heroes. His teacher, impressed, nominated him for a Youth Environmental Award. The ceremony set for spring at the Seattle Aquarium, where the salt-tanged air would evoke distant savannas, but fame's shadow brought unexpected thorns. One crisp November evening, as fog rolled off the Sound and blanketed the city, a knock echoed through the house. Emily answered to find a reporter from a tabloid-style outlet, notebook in hand, her smile too polished under the porch light. "Mrs. Hargrove, just a few questions about the cub. Did you know her mother was poached? Sources say the Pride was targeted." The words hit like a cold gust, freezing Emily in the doorway. Mark appeared behind her, ushering the woman away with firm politeness. But the seed of unease took root. That night, over takeout Thai from the corner spot, Pad See Ew steaming on plates, they dissected the claim. Tyler Googled frantically, unearthing forum posts about a recent anti-poaching raid near the Mara, where lionesses had been snared for bushmeat trade. "It changes everything," Tyler said, his fork hovering mid-air, eyes wide behind his glasses. "We thought she was just left behind, but if poachers—" Emily nodded, the plush lion suddenly feeling like a mocking emblem on the counter. Sleep evaded her. The ceiling fans whir, mimicking the Jeep's engine on that rainy track. By morning, she'd contacted Amina via email, the response coming swift and sobering. Confirmed, the Pride had scattered after a poacher skirmish, the mother likely among the casualties. Mara wasn't just lost, she was a survivor of humanity's darker incursions. The revelation twisted the rescue's triumph into something sharper, fueling Emily's advocacy with urgency. She organized a virtual panel with Juma and Elias, streaming it live from her office. The family's living room transformed into a makeshift studio with borrowed ring lights and a microphone stand. The event drew hundreds, questions flooding the chat about sustainable tourism and anti-poaching tech. Mark moderated, his steady voice guiding the flow, while Tyler handled the tech, muting echoey lines with quick fingers. Juma's face pixelated on screen, his lodge's thatched roof visible, shared tales of night patrols and informant networks. "Your story brought eyes here," he said, eyes crinkling. "Donations bought new radios, drones even. But poachers adapt. They come from cities, poor and desperate, or rich hunters from afar." The discussion stretched into the night, Seattle's skyline twinkling outside the window, a world away, yet inextricably linked. In the aftermath, the family deepened their commitment. Emily took a sabbatical from teaching, partnering with the Woodland Park Zoo for a Serengeti Voices exhibit. Interactive maps, VR simulations of the river crossing, and a corner dedicated to Mara, with live cams from the sanctuary showing her growing stronger, now play-fighting with a sibling orphan. Tyler's channel collaborated with the zoo, his subscriber count doubling as he narrated behind-the-scenes tours, his voice maturing from excited teen to thoughtful storyteller. Mark's algorithms went live, alerting rangers to suspicious vehicle tracks via AI pattern recognition, a quiet victory tested in a mock drill that Juma praised over email. Yet personal costs emerged. Holiday gatherings with extended family turned awkward, aunts probing for the real drama over turkey and cranberry sauce, uncles joking about lion tamers that masked envy. Emily fielded interview requests, politely declining most, but one from PBS led to a heartfelt segment aired nationwide, her words about the Cubs' trust resonating in living rooms from coast to coast. Tyler faced bullies at school, whispers of fake news, testing his resolve, but he pushed back with facts, turning detractors into curious allies. Winter deepened, snow dusting the Cascades visible from their backyard, a serene counterpoint to the inner turmoil. Emily dreamed of the river again, but now the cub, Mara, stood on the far bank, roaring not in fear but strength, her pride reforming in the distance. Waking to Mark's arm around her, the warmth chased the chill. The rescue had stunned the world, yes, but its true power unfolded in these incremental shifts. The family's bonds reforged, their voices amplifying the wild, silent pleas. As spring approached, whispers of a return trip circulated not as tourists, but partners in the ongoing saga. Mara thrived, the Hargroves evolved, and the echoes of that fateful pursuit rippled onward, binding human compassion to the untamed heart of the earth. Spring arrived in Seattle with a tentative burst of cherry blossoms lining the streets of Capitol Hill, their pink petals drifting like confetti against the grey backdrop of lingering clouds. Emily Hargrove navigated the familiar route to the Woodland Park Zoo, her hybrid SUV humming softly over pothole-riddled roads, the radio tuned low to a NPR segment on global conservation efforts. The exhibit she'd helped curate, Serengeti Voices, had opened to crowds last month, drawing families who marveled at the touchscreens simulating the Mara's treacherous currents and the holographic pride of lions stalking through virtual grasslands. But today, Emily wasn't there as a volunteer. She was meeting a contact from the Tanzanian embassy, a step toward turning their viral moment into something tangible. The zoo's entrance buzzed with school groups, children's laughter mingling with the distant calls of captive animals, a far cry from the untamed symphony of the savannah. Emily parked near the African Savannah exhibit, her heart quickening as she spotted Dr. Lena Mwangi waiting by the lion enclosure. Lena was a mid-30s ecologist from Dar es Salaam, her dark hair cropped short and her posture straight as a baobab trunk, clad in a simple blouse and khakis that spoke of field work over boardrooms. They'd connected via email after the PBS special, Lena's messages laced with a quiet urgency about funding shortfalls in Tanzanian parks. "Emily, it's good to finally meet," Lena said, extending a hand warm from the mild sun filtering through the overcast sky. Her accent carried the rhythmic lilt of coastal Swahili, evoking memories of Juma's stories around the lodge campfire. They strolled toward a shaded bench overlooking the enclosure, where a rehabilitated lioness lounged in the sun, her maneless form a reminder of the gender's overlooked strength in the wild. Emily inhaled the earthy scent of mulch and hay, a diluted echo of Serengeti dust. "Your exhibit is inspiring. We've seen a spike in donations from American donors, enough for new fencing at Serenera." Emily nodded, pulling a folder from her tote bag, its edges worn from countless reviews. Inside were grant proposals she'd drafted with Mark's help, leveraging his tech contacts for drone surveillance systems. "That's why I asked you here. Tyler's channel has built a network, and we've got commitments from a few Seattle tech firms, but we want to do more. Partner directly, maybe fund a ranger training program." Lena's eyes lit up, but a shadow crossed her face as she glanced at her phone, the screen glowing with an incoming alert. "It's promising, but timing is everything. Mara's progress is good, but there's trouble brewing." Back home that evening, the Hargrove kitchen filled with the savory aroma of roasting chicken, Mark's attempt at a family dinner ritual to ground them amid the whirlwind. Tyler set the table, his movements efficient now, the awkward teen slouch replaced by a focused energy honed from months of advocacy. He was taller too, shooting up another inch over winter, his voice deepening as he recounted his latest video stats over plates of garlic mashed potatoes. "Over 100,000 views on the panel stream. People are asking about return trips. Should I tease it?" Mark carved the bird, steam rising in lazy curls, his knife steady, but his mind elsewhere, calculating the logistics of international travel post-pandemic. Emily shared the embassy meeting as they ate, the wooden table scarred from years of family meals, now scattered with proposal drafts and a tablet streaming live from the sanctuary. Mara's image flickered on screen, the cub, now nearly 8 months old, batting at a burlap sack in her enclosure, her movements fluid despite the faint scar on her paw from the sprain. The sight tugged at Emily's chest, a maternal ache that hadn't faded. "Lena says the pride that abandoned her, scattered by poachers, has been spotted reforming near the Western Corridor, but poaching's up. They're using sophisticated snares now, GPS-tracked for quick retrieval." Tyler's fork paused midway to his mouth, gravy dripping onto his napkin. "Wait, so Mara's release could be soon? We have to go back. Film it. Show the world." Mark set down his utensils, the clink echoing in the brief silence. "It's not that simple, son. Visas, costs, and work. My project's in crunch mode. Plus, after that tabloid mess, do we want more spotlight?" The words hung heavy, stirring the old tensions. Emily reached across, her fingers brushing his. "It's not about spotlight anymore. It's about follow-through. Lena invited us to observe a release simulation, hands-off, educational. Think of it as bridging what we started." The debate stretched into dessert, apple pie cooling on the counter, its cinnamon scent clashing with the undercurrent of unease. Tyler argued with animated gestures, pulling up maps on his phone to show flight routes and sanctuary coordinates, his passion infectious. Mark relented slightly, admitting the AI tool he'd developed had already flagged 2 poacher incursions in test runs. By bedtime, a tentative plan formed, a summer return, funded partly by Tyler's GoFundMe, which had ballooned to $50,000. Emily lay awake beside Mark, the ceiling fan stirring the air, her mind replaying Lena's warning about escalating threats. Chinese demand for lion bones in traditional medicine, fueling black market rings that bypassed park borders. The next week brought action. Emily coordinated with the zoo for a fundraising gala, transforming the Savannah exhibit into an evening of storytelling under string lights, the air humming with jazz from a local quartet and the clink of wine glasses. Guests milled about, tech execs in slim suits, environmentalists with reusable totes, drawn by the Hargrove name, now synonymous with the Miracle Cub. Tyler emceed a short presentation, his nerves masked by practiced poise, projecting photos of Mara mid-pounce. "This isn't just one story," he said, voice steady over the murmur. "It's a call to protect the threads connecting us all." Donations flowed, pledges for the training program secured, but midway through, Lena pulled Emily aside near the Meerkat Burrow replica, her expression tight. "Bad news from the field," she whispered, the party's laughter a jarring backdrop. "Poachers hit Serenera last night. 2 rangers injured, equipment stolen. Mara's safe, but the release program's on hold. They're too close now." Emily's stomach knotted, the warmth of Chardonnay turning sour. She excused herself to the quiet of the parking lot, dialing Amina under the sodium glow of street lamps. The conservation officer's voice crackled over the line. "Fatigue evident. Emily, it's chaos here. Drones spotted vehicles near the enclosures. We need those funds yesterday. Barriers, more patrols." Emily promised acceleration, hanging up as Mark joined her, his arm around her shoulders against the evening chill. The drive home wound through lit streets, rain starting to patter on the windshield, a Pacific Northwest drizzle that felt worlds away from the Mara's floods. Tyler, in the back, scrolled updates from wildlife alerts, his face illuminated blue. "This is why we can't wait. If we don't go back, who will?" Mark gripped the wheel tighter, the wipers swishing rhythmically. "We're trying, Ty. But it's a marathon, not a sprint." Emily stared out at the blurred taillights, the revelation of poaching shadow deepening the stakes. Their intervention had saved one life, but the wild's fragility demanded more, a sustained fight against indifference. In the days that followed, the family rallied. Mark pulled overtime to refine the AI, integrating real-time data from Lena's team. Tyler's videos shifted tone, urgent pleas interspersed with facts on the bone trade's brutality, his subscriber count climbing as shares spread. Emily dove into logistics, booking flights and securing permissions, her classroom on hold for a leave that felt like stepping back into the storm. Dreams returned, Mara cornered by shadows in the grass, her roar a plea that echoed Emily's own resolve. The return loomed, not as closure, but ignition, a deeper plunge into the saga where family bonds and global ties intertwined against the encroaching dark. As summer neared, The Hargroves packed not just suitcases, but purpose, ready to face the savannah's unyielding truths once more. The summer sun beat down on Julius Nyerere International Airport like a relentless drum, the air thick with the scent of jet fuel and blooming frangipani as the Hargrove family stepped off the plane. Emily wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, her backpack heavy with notebooks and a tablet loaded with grant documents. It had been 8 months since the river rescue, but the journey back felt like crossing an invisible threshold, the humid Tanzanian breeze carrying whispers of unfinished business. Mark trailed behind, juggling their luggage with a practicality that masked his apprehension, while Tyler bounded ahead, phone already out, to capture the chaotic swirl of porters and travelers under the open-air terminal. They'd arrived a day early, courtesy of Tyler's GoFundMe windfall and a partnership with the zoo that covered flights and a modest stipend for advocacy work. Juma waited at the curb in his familiar Land Rover, now sporting a fresh layer of dust from recent patrols, his grin wide as he enveloped Emily in a brief hug. "Habari, the savannah missed you, and so did Mara." His eyes twinkled, but there was a weariness in his posture, the kind born from sleepless nights guarding against shadows. As they piled in, the jeep rumbling to life, Tyler peppered him with questions about the sanctuary, his excitement bubbling over like the carbonated sodas they bought from a vendor. The drive to Cerro Nera twisted through baobab-dotted plains, the landscape a vivid tapestry of greens and golds under a sky vast enough to swallow doubts. Emily gazed out, the window framing acacias where giraffes browsed languidly, their long necks swaying like metronomes. Mark's hand found hers, a silent anchor amid the bumps. "This feels right," he murmured, though his free hand gripped the door handle tighter than necessary. The poaching alerts from spring had escalated. Lena's updates detailing ambushes on ranger outposts, snares laced with toxins that left carcasses bloating under the sun. Their return wasn't vacation, it was reconnaissance, a chance to deploy Mark's AI prototype and bolster the sanctuary's defenses. By midday, they reached the sanctuary gates, a chain-link barrier reinforced with solar-powered cameras, the air humming with the low buzz of generators. Amina greeted them at the entrance, her braided hair tied back, uniform crisp despite the heat. She was leaner than Emily remembered, the lines around her eyes deeper from coordinating night shifts. "Welcome back. Mara's waiting. Come see." They followed her down a gravel path lined with enclosures, the earthy tang of animal musk rising as they passed zebras and orphaned gazelles. Tyler's camera rolled discreetly, capturing the raw authenticity that his Seattle audience craved. Mara's pen was at the far end, a spacious acre of simulated savanna with rocky outcrops and tall grasses seeded to mimic the wild. The cub, no longer little, but a sleek juvenile at nearly 80 pounds, lounged in the shade of a fever tree, her golden coat shimmering as she groomed a paw. Emily's breath caught, a rush of emotion swelling like the Mara River in flood. "She's magnificent," she whispered, pressing against the fence. Mara lifted her head, ears perking, those same golden eyes locking on with a flicker of recognition that sent chills down Emily's spine. A low chuff escaped her throat, not the desperate mew of before, but a confident rumble, as if acknowledging old allies. Amina smiled faintly, unlocking the gate for a closer view. She's top of her cohort, hunts in tandem now, coordinates with the other rehab lions, the paws fully healed, no limp. Tyler knelt, zooming in, his voice hushed. "Dude, she's a boss. Look at that stare." Mark hung back, scanning the perimeter with a critical eye, noting the worn spots in the fence where brush pressed too close. "How's security holding?" The AI data showed clusters of activity here last month. Amina's expression sobered. "Tight, but stretched. We lost a radio tower to vandals, poachers testing our edges. Your tech could change that. Elias is prepping a demo tomorrow. They spent the afternoon in the vet clinic, a concrete bunker cooled by fans whirring overhead, where Dr. Hassan, the sanctuary's lead veterinarian, walked them through Mara's file. Charts detailed her weight gain, blood work showing robust immunity from a carefully managed diet of goat and supplements. Emily traced the timeline with her finger, the dates aligning with their viral surge, donations that funded the very vaccines, keeping infections at bay. She followed us for miles, Emily said softly, more to Mara visible through the window than anyone. And now look at her. Hassan nodded, his stethoscope dangling like a pendant. Resilience like that, rare, but the wild doesn't forgive weakness. Release is targeted for dry season, if threats ease. As dusk fell, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple, the family joined the rangers for a communal dinner around a fire pit, the crackle of flames mingling with Swahili songs from a battered guitar. Juma recounted a recent patrol, his voice steady over plates of ugali and nyama choma, the grilled meat's smoky aroma evoking lodge nights past. Poachers came close, 3 men with rifles, scouting for prides. We scared them off, but bullets flew. Tyler's eyes widened, fork forgotten, while Mark leaned in, discussing integration points for the AI, thermal imaging feeds that could alert patrols via satellite. Emily listened, the fire's warmth chasing the evening chill, but her gaze drifted to Mara's silhouette pacing her enclosure, a sentinel in the gathering dark. That night, in guest quarters, a simple thatched hut with mosquito netting and cots, they unpacked under lantern light. Tyler edited footage on his laptop, the glow casting shadows on the walls adorned with faded wildlife posters. This is gold. Real stakes, not just cute cub pics. Mark reviewed code on his tablet, troubleshooting connectivity for the demo, his focus a shield against the isolation. Emily stepped outside, the stars a glittering canopy overhead, the savannah's chorus of insects and distant hyena whoops enveloping her. She thought of Seattle's rain-slicked streets, the zoo's contained worlds, and how this raw expanse had reshaped them. Mara was thriving, yes, but the threats loomed larger. Poachers' shadows lengthening like the encroaching night. Sleep came fitfully, broken by a distant lion's roar. Mara's perhaps claiming her space. Morning brought the demo. Elias leading them to a command post, screens flickering with drone feeds as Mark synced the AI. It flagged an anomaly, a vehicle track veering too close to the western fence. False positive? Mark asked, but Elias shook his head. No, scouts, your system caught what we missed. Adrenaline surged, the family mobilizing with the rangers for a low-key pursuit, jeeps kicking up dust as they tailed the signal. Emily's heart raced, the wheel in her hands now, the savannah blurring past. Tyler filmed from the back, voice steady despite the bumps. They didn't confront, just documented, turning data into deterrence. By midday, back at the sanctuary, relief mixed with resolve. Mara watched from her pen as they debriefed, her presence a living testament to fragile victories. The Hargroves had returned not as saviors, but collaborators, their bonds to this place and each other deepening amid the wild's unyielding pulse. Yet as poacher incursions whispered of battles ahead, Emily sensed the story evolving, Mara's release a horizon laced with uncertainty, pulling them further into the fray. The midday sun climbed higher, baking the earth into a shimmering haze that distorted the horizon where the sanctuary's fences met the endless sea of grass. Emily gripped the jeep's door handle as Juma navigated the rutted access road back from the pursuit, the vehicle's tires humming over gravel, still warm from the morning's chase. Dust devils danced in the rear view, carrying the faint scent of acacia sap and sun-scorched soil. Tyler sat beside her in the back, his phone clutched like a talisman, replaying the drone footage on mute. the ghostly outline of an abandoned truck half hidden in a thicket, its tire tracks veering toward a dry riverbed. That was too close, he muttered, his voice laced with the thrill that masked deeper unease. At 17 now, he'd outgrown the wide-eyed boy from their first trip, but the savannah's dangers still sharpened his edges. Mark rode shotgun, laptop balanced on his knees, fingers tapping furiously to log the AI's hit. False alarm turned real. Those were fresh prints, headed northwest. If your team's drones can circle back. Juma nodded, his eyes scanning the mirrors with the vigilance of a hawk. Elias is on it. Your machine, Buana Mark. It sees what eyes miss. But poachers are ghosts. They vanish like mist. The words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken toll. Rangers who'd lost limbs to snares. Prides decimated for parts that ended up in distant markets. Emily felt the weight settle in her chest, a familiar ache amplified by the proximity. Back in Seattle, threats were abstract, news clips and petitions, but here they breathed the same air as the lions. They pulled into the sanctuary compound as the heat peaked, the chain-link gates clanging shut behind them like a sigh of temporary safety. Amina met them at the vet clinic, her face streaked with sweat under the wide brim of her cap, clipboard in hand. No casualties from the scout vehicle, abandoned gear, but they took the radio we had stashed. Mara's cohort is restless. She paced all morning after the engine started up. Emily followed her inside, the cool blast of the air-conditioned room a stark relief, carrying the sterile tang of antiseptics and fresh straw. Through the observation window, Mara prowled her enclosure, her muscular form rippling under the dappled shade, tail flicking with irritation. The other rehab lions, a pair of males from a poached litter, mirrored her, their low growls vibrating through the glass like distant thunder. Dr. Hassan joined them, his white coat rumpled from an early surgery on a snare-trapped impala. "Vitals are solid," he said, flipping through a tablet. "But stress levels are up across the board. The incursions disrupt everything. Hormones off, hunts aborted. Mara's the anchor, if she bolts during release." He trailed off, the implication clear. Emily leaned closer to the window, her palm pressing against the cool pane as if she could reach through. Mara paused, head tilting, those golden eyes finding hers again in that uncanny way. A chuff escaped the lioness, soft but insistent, pulling at Emily's heartstrings like the first mew on that rainy track. "She's ready," Emily said quietly, more conviction than question. "We all are." The afternoon blurred into strategy sessions in the command post, a prefab hut buzzing with radios and screens, flickering under the whir of ceiling fans. Elias unrolled maps on a scarred table, his scarred hands tracing routes where poacher trails intersected migration paths. Mark synced his AI prototype to the sanctuary's network, the software's interface glowing blue as it overlaid heat maps of animal movements with flagged anomalies, vehicle signatures, unusual foot traffic. Tyler contributed sketches from his phone, diagramming fence weak points based on the morning's visuals, his ideas surprisingly tactical after months devouring ranger manuals. "If we add motion sensors here," he pointed, "it could link to the drones for real-time alerts." Amina nodded approval, her braids swinging as she marked it up. "Smart, young one. Locals could maintain them. Jobs mean loyalty." But as the sun dipped toward the acacias, casting elongated shadows across the compound, a crackle from the radio shattered the focus. Elias snatched it up, his face hardening as Swahili burst forth in clipped urgency. Translation came swift. A ranger patrol ambushed 2 clicks east, gunfire exchanged, 1 injured. "Go," Juma said, already grabbing keys. The Hargroves exchanged glances, Mark's practical hesitation warring with the fire in Tyler's eyes, Emily's resolve stealing like the river's current. "We're not combatants," Mark protested, but Emily was moving, slinging a medkit from the wall. "We're witnesses, and we brought tools they need." Tyler pocketed his phone. This wasn't for content anymore. It was raw, immediate. The convoy roared out, 3 jeeps kicking up red dust that choked the air like blood. Emily rode with Amina, the conservation officer's hands white-knuckled on the wheel, her jaw set. These men, they're not all monsters. Some are farmers pushed by drought, paid scraps by city syndicates. But bullets don't discriminate. The track wound through thorn scrub, the engines growled, drowning the cicadas, until they crested a rise and spotted the scene. A ranger slumped against a termite mound, leg tourniqueted with a belt, his partner scanning the bush with a rifle. Poacher vehicle tracks scarred the ground, fleeing toward the park's edge. They stabilized the injured man, fractured femur, blood soaking the soil, while Elias radioed for evac. Emily knelt in the dirt, applying pressure with gauze that smelled of iodine, her hands steady from biology lab drills, but trembling inside. The ranger, a young Tanzanian named Kato, with a mustache like Juma's, gripped her arm. Saw them, 3 with AKs, heading for the river crossing, warned the prides. Tyler filmed discreetly from the jeep, capturing the urgency without exploiting it, his face pale under the dust. Mark uploaded coordinates to the AI, the system pinging nearby patrols with predictive paths where the poachers might hit next. As the med chopper thumped in from Arusha, whirring blades stirring the grass into frenzy, relief washed over them like a receding wave. Kato was airlifted, stable but scarred, the incident a stark punctuation to their return. Back at the sanctuary by twilight, the family collapsed around the fire pit. Ugali steaming in bowls, the night stars emerging like hesitant witnesses. Mara's distant chuff carried on the breeze, a counterpoint to the ranger's subdued chatter. Emily stared into the flames, the poacher shadows lengthening her doubts. "We can't fix it all," she said softly to Mark, who nodded, arm around her shoulders. "But we can fight smarter." Tyler added wood to the fire, sparks rising like hopes. The pursuit had escalated, binding them tighter to the fray, Mara's release now a beacon amid gathering storms. Yet in the savannah's vast silence, the true test loomed, whether compassion could outpace the encroaching dark. The flames in the fire pit danced lower as the night deepened, casting flickering shadows across the rangers' faces, etched with exhaustion and quiet resolve. Emily Hargrove sat cross-legged on a worn blanket, the rough weave pressing into her skin through her khaki pants, the residual heat from the day seeping up from the ground like a persistent memory. The air hummed with the low murmur of Swahili conversations interspersed with English updates. Kato's surgery had gone well in Arusha, the bone set without complication, but the poacher's truck had yielded only tire scraps and a discarded GPS unit, clues to a larger network snaking from Dar es Salaam to the park's fringes. Mark sat beside her, his laptop balanced on a stump, screen dimmed to preserve night vision. As he cross-referenced the device's data with his AI feeds, his fingers occasionally pausing to rub the bridge of his nose. Tyler huddled closer to the fire, poking at the embers with a stick, the orange glow illuminating the dust smudges on his cheeks like war paint. At 17, the weight of the day's chaos had stripped away the last vestiges of his teenage detachment. His questions now came measured, probing the rangers about patrol rotations and community outreach programs that paid farmers to guard rather than poach. Juma, nursing a tin mug of chai, clapped him on the shoulder. "You've got the spirit of the land in you now, young Hargrove. Not just eyes for the camera." Tyler managed a half-smile, but his gaze drifted to Mara's enclosure, where the lioness's silhouette paced restlessly under the starlit sky, her form a dark ripple against the fence. Amina approached from the shadows, her boots crunching softly on the gravel, carrying a thermos that she passed around to refill mugs. The steam rose in fragrant curls, cutting the night's chill that had settled like a blanket over the savannah. "The council's meeting at dawn," she said, settling onto the log opposite Emily. "With your tech and the funds, we push for expanded buffers, buy land from locals, turn it into conservancies, but it starts with trust." Her words carried the cadence of someone who'd buried friends to the trade, her eyes reflecting the fire's light like polished obsidian. Emily nodded, sipping the sweet spiced tea, its warmth spreading through her core. Back in Seattle, solutions felt like checkboxes on petitions. Here, they were lifelines woven from compromise and grit. As the group dispersed toward midnight, the family retreated to their hut, the lantern's soft glow revealing the simple furnishings, a row of cots draped in mosquito netting, a shelf of field guides dog-eared from countless hands. Mark powered down his laptop with a sigh, the screen's blue light fading to black. "This AI, it's a start, but it's like patching a dam with tape. One breach and—" He trailed off, pulling Emily into a loose embrace, her head resting against his chest where she could hear the steady thump of his heart, a rhythm that had anchored her through classroom chaos and family rifts. "We're in deep now," she murmured, her voice muffled against his shirt, scented with sweat and sunscreen. "But Mara's proof it matters." Tyler flopped onto his cot, scrolling through encrypted notes on his phone, interviews with villagers about crop failures driving men to snares. "What if we stay longer, extend the trip, help with the demo rollout?" Mark chuckled softly, ruffling his son's hair. "One crisis at a time, champ. We've got lives waiting back home, your senior year, my deadlines." But the words lacked finality. The savannah had a way of blurring horizons, making return tickets feel like tentative sketches. Sleep came in fragments, broken by the whoops of hyenas circling distant kills and the occasional rumble of a ranger jeep patrolling the perimeter. Emily dreamed of the river again, but this time the current carried not peril, but possibility. Mara swimming strong toward a pride on the far bank, her cubs trailing in her wake. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong, the sky streaking pink as the family gathered for the council meeting in the sanctuary's mess hall, an open-air structure with tin roof rattling in the breeze. Elias presided, maps spread across a communal table laden with mangoes and flatbread, locals from nearby Maasai villages joining via radio link, their voices crackling with input on land shares. The discussions stretched through the morning heat, voices rising and falling like the undulating plains outside. Mark demonstrated the AI on a projector, the software's predictions earning nods from elders skeptical of white man's machines. Tyler translated tech jargon into simple Swahili phrases, bridging gaps with his earnest energy, while Emily advocated for women's roles in patrols, drawing from Amina's examples of mothers turned guardians. By noon, agreements solidified, 10,000 acres buffered, funded by the Zoo Gala's pledges, with the Hargroves' involvement as consultants, not overlords. As the meeting adjourned, Amina led them to Mara's enclosure for what she called a soft trial. The gates creaked open, rangers forming a loose perimeter as the lioness was coaxed into a larger release pen adjacent to the wild corridor. Mara hesitated at the threshold, her muscles coiling, then bounded forward with a burst of speed that blurred her form against the grass. She paused at the outer fence, sniffing the air heavy with the scent of free-roaming herds, her roar tentative at first, then full-throated, echoing across the savannah like a declaration. Emily watched, tears blurring her vision, the sound vibrating through her bones, a symphony of survival reclaimed. The family lingered until dusk, helping calibrate the new sensors along the corridor, the sun dipping behind acacias in a blaze of gold. That evening, over a final fire, Juma raised a toast with palm wine, to the lost cub who found her way, and those who followed. Laughter mingled with the crackle, bonds forged in mud and urgency. As they boarded the jeep for the airport the next day, Mara visible one last time on a sanctuary feed, her form merging with the horizon, Emily felt the story's arc complete, not an end, but a continuum. Back in Seattle, the ripples would persist. Tyler's advocacy, Mark's innovations, her lectures infused with lived truth. The world had been stunned by the rescue, but in its quiet aftermath, lives intertwined across oceans, proving compassion's reach could tame even the wildest storms.